There's all sorts of talk about the college football playoff right now between the SEC, the Big Ten, and the rest of the country, and it seems like a rivalry could be brewing.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, and it is the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. I'm your man, Jacob Goins. I appreciate you being here, making this your first listen or your first watch every single day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. All right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. Well, we're going to talk about this idea of college basketball versus the NBA because some of the biggest names in the sport have taken their name out of the NBA draft since that deadline was midnight last night and have returned to college. I'll tell you why that's important, why that's a growing trend, and how it could benefit the Hoosiers moving forward. Plus, speaking of Indiana basketball, Marquette and Kentucky are on that non-conference schedule. Going to dive into those a little bit and tell you why those are important on top of some of your Big Ten games. But the conversation that is going on all week long that seems to be taking the world by storm is on the side of college football with the SEC spring meetings going on. The Big Ten had a meeting on Wednesday. There's a lot of conversations going on about what the future of college football and the college football playoff are going to look like. And it's the idea of, okay, at the top, it's what is the future of college football going to look like? And that's a loaded question. That is a dangerous question. That is one that is simply impossible to answer. But then you start working down off of that with different branches, and it's like, okay, let's talk about the college football playoff. Okay, well, to talk about that, you have to talk about rankings, you have to talk about committees, you have to talk about scheduling, and that's where a lot of the drama has come in this week. Greg Sankey's been on something this week, man. He's got 15 different quotes out there that have got people all fired up and talking about what they're going to do as a conference, how it impacts the rest of college football, who they're going to take with them, and things like that. And it just seems like to me that the SEC and the Big Ten are trying to work together, but they're also not trying to work together. And you understand why. They're two separate entities. They are two separate conferences who are trying to look out for the best thing in their best interest in the teams that are in their conference. It just makes sense. Tony Petitti's looking out for the Big Ten, and Greg Sankey's looking out for the SEC. It is what it is. But I thought that we were at a point where these two were at least kind of going to join at the hip and say, look, what's best for you is best for us. So let's go at this thing together. But I don't know. The comments from Greg Sankey this week just don't seem to be all that. He had something this week about not being satisfied with the state of the college football playoff. He's presented this idea of the Big Ten playing the SEC every single year, and he's commented on that. And I saw a headline of an article where, and I can't remember the article, so I can't give the credit, unfortunately, but it said something like Greg Sankey wants to fix college football without the repercussions. He wants to be the bad guy, but not get the flack for it, or something along those lines. And it's kind of true when you think about it. I mean, he's so vocal and he's so big, and he feels like he's just this untouchable figure. And let me say this. I actually like Greg Sankey. For the most part, I do. I think he's done some really good things for college athletics and for his conference that have impacted the entire landscape of the sports. But this whole situation is starting to get murky for me. And look, I don't know the true best way to settle at least college football, right? But what I can tell you is the SEC needs to play a ninth game. They need to have a ninth game on the schedule to make it even with everybody else. They also need to drop one of those, and I think all of college football needs to do this, drop one of those cupcake games off the schedule. I mentioned this the other day on the show. Drop one of those. We don't need to play Indiana State this year. Let that be a fun non-conference game. Whether it's an SEC team or not, I don't really care. Make it one. That's fine by me, but make it a game that means something, because with the college football playoff right now, it encourages teams to schedule lightly, like in like Indiana. Look at our schedule. Our Big Ten schedule's fine, but our non-conference schedule's horrific. It's going to be one of the worst in college football this year because of the three cupcakes that you play at the start of the season. So I understand there's benefits there. I just don't think they are good enough benefits. I think there are more benefits by playing bigger teams. But the playoff landscape right now encourages you to not play tough games, which is wild to me, because when you look at college basketball and college baseball, since that's getting started this weekend, when you look at those postseason tournaments, when you look at the selection committees for those two sports and how they select teams to make it to the playoffs, to the postseason, those formats encourage you to schedule harder. Basketball and baseball and college, they want you to schedule tough games. They want Indiana to play Marquette and Kentucky, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. They want you in baseball to go and play in these tournaments in Arlington and wherever the case may be, right, in Florida and things like that. They want you to go and play tough out-of-conference teams on top of playing a tough conference schedule. That helps you with a thing called the RPI in baseball. You have the net in basketball. We don't really have that in football, do we? It's just, we got the AP poll. That's cool. Oh, well, strength of record, that's live and die by that, right? Not necessarily. I just don't understand where we have fallen through the cracks here, where baseball and basketball, you are encouraged to play tough teams. In football, they are encouraging you to take the easiest way possible. And Greg Sankey's trying to address that. I think Tony Petitti's trying to address that as well. But I'm confused on why the Big Ten and the SEC are working together, in air quotes. Greg Sankey called Tony. Don't worry. He made sure he made a call to him the other night. They're, quote, working together, but it seems like they want different things. But that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And whether that is guaranteed teams in the playoff, or it's scheduling each other on a regular basis, or getting the most money, right? You would think that the two biggest conferences in America, ones that I ultimately think are going to tell everybody else to kick rocks, and they're going to join together. They're going to take the top 2/3 of each conference and move and do their own thing. Why are they butting heads right now? Why are they going against each other? And I don't think they are trying to. I just think that's how it's going. That's how it comes off anyway. And maybe I am completely misreading this, but Greg Sankey's not happy. The SEC's not happy. And you're going to hear later on today on our Big Ten Squad show, folks in the Big Ten think it's because they're not winning. And I'm starting to think that too. I wasn't ready to go that far yet, but it seems like that's the case. It seems like a kid has just gotten moved from the big table to the kiddie table at Thanksgiving, and they're not too happy about it. And now they're banging their fist on the table, and they're kicking and screaming until somebody comes and gets them. That's what it seems like right now from the SEC, because they want to ensure that they get their way. They want to ensure that the most teams in the college football playoff come from the SEC. Whatever that may be and whatever that looks like, the Big Ten needs to be right there too, because this conference has earned it over the entire history of its existence. The Big Ten is just as good as the SEC. And for a team like Indiana, there's so many possibilities here, but we need the Big Ten to fight for us, because if we continue to get better and be relevant in college football, we need to make sure that we are correctly represented in the college football playoff, whether that is 4 automatic bids for the conference or just 11 at large, whatever the case may be. Indiana needs to be fought for by the Big Ten and others like us as well. I just hope the Big Ten and the SEC eventually can start working together for truly and figure this thing out down the road, because it's getting ugly right now and they got to get this thing figured out really soon. All right, coming up here on at Locked On Hoosiers, we'll flip over to basketball as the Hoosiers have Marquette and Kentucky, which that game just got a whole lot tougher. We'll talk about those two, why it's important, and in comparison to the rest of your schedule. We'll have that for you next right here on Locked On Hoosiers. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and how about the Oklahoma City Thunder? They are now into the NBA Finals, and every night it's delivering highlight-worthy performances. It was all OKC last night. Major momentum shifts, can't miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action, all right? FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and during the game with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Do you think Halliburton goes off tonight for the Indiana Pacers? What about Nesmith? Is he going to knock down a couple of threes? He played well the other night. He is going to have to step up for the Pacers tonight. You can take all of that on FanDuel right now. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. And if it wins, they're going to give you $200 in bonus bets, all right? Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, welcome back into Locked On Hoosiers. Appreciate you being here, making this your go-to spot for all things Indiana athletics. And we flip from football to basketball for a couple of segments. Reminder, we're going to talk why players are withdrawing from the NBA and going back to college, and why it's great for the college game and how it could benefit Indiana in the next several years. But Indiana basketball, speaking of them, looking at this non-conference schedule, which is not finalized by any means, but the two games that are on it that we know of is Marquette and Kentucky. And these two games fascinate me. They really do, because Marquette, you're going to play in Chicago on November 9th. So that'll be fairly early in the regular season, or in the non-conference season, or just to start the year, right? Then you're going to play at Kentucky on December 13th, which will be, obviously mid-December, a couple of weeks before you get Big Ten play started. You'll actually have a couple of Big Ten games sprinkled in there. And so both of these games are really, really important, because we understand that we're going to get tested in the Big Ten. Darren DeVries and this coaching staff and this team will get tested in the Big Ten, a conference that I think is going to be very, very good this year. We had a bracketology episode yesterday, and it says basically Darren DeVries and this team are expected to miss the tournament in 2025 and 2026. And I don't agree with that. I don't think this team misses the tournament, but you start diving into it and trying to figure out, okay, where can you get a win or two that will benefit this team, that will be a resume building opportunity? It's these two games right here. You're going to take on Marquette in Chicago, and you're going to take on Kentucky on the road. One's neutral site, one's on the road, a true road game. And we don't have actual net rankings and things that matter right now, but I would expect both of these to be considered quad one, wouldn't you? I think these are both going to be quad one games that if you win them, you will get major credit for them. And I bring up these two non-conference games because I want to take you back to last year. I want to take you back to a year ago and what Indiana did and did not do in non-conference play. And I'll tell you why I'm telling you this in just a second. You played South Carolina. Okay, you beat South Carolina. They ended up being bad, all right? They were one of the worst teams in the SEC. You got embarrassed by Louisville. That was foreshadowing. You got beat that game was worse than the score says, by Gonzaga. Okay, you beat Providence. Woohoo, right? You played Sam Houston, which is funny. And then Chattanooga and Winthrop and Miami of Ohio, along with SIU Edwardsville and Eastern Illinois and UNC Greensboro. But the games that actually matter were South Carolina, Louisville, Gonzaga, and Providence. I'll give you those, maybe. I mean, Providence and South Carolina, I'm not even giving you those. So already, your non-conference schedule wasn't all that difficult. Remember, that was in the Battle for Atlantis, right? Is that what we played in last year? To where you played Louisville and Gonzaga, the only two major recognizable games and teams on your non-conference schedule, and you got embarrassed in both of them. You didn't show up. You played terrible in those games. And turns out those teams were just better than you, but you didn't play good basketball in those games either. And I bring that up because you played mediocre basketball throughout the Big Ten schedule, and you were one of the first teams out of the NCAA tournament. You think a win over Louisville could have helped you get into the NCAA tournament? I do. You think a win over Gonzaga, who was number 3 at the time, would have helped you? What did they end up being, like an 8 seed in the tournament? You think that would have helped you get into the NCAA tournament as a resume building win? I do. Those games matter. They matter on your schedule. And as I talked about earlier, the tournament committee uses your non conference games. Wins against Eastern Illinois don't move the needle for anybody. But people take notice when you play the Gonzagas of the world, and they will notice this year when you play Marquette and Kentucky on the schedule. When you go to Chicago for a neutral site game against Marquette, and when you step inside a Rupp Arena and play Kentucky, that will be a national televised game that the Hoosiers will be a part of against the Cats, which that game is a whole lot tougher. And sure, you saw Otega Oweh decided he's coming back to Lexington. So that's not fun. But that team, dude, that team's going to be nasty. Just a complete side note. That team is going to be really, really good. But that could be a really good test of where we are at that point in the season. That's about a month and a half or so into the season. A couple of Big Ten games will be coming up right after that. So that'll be a perfect opportunity for Darren DeVries and this team to go in and say, all right, boys, let's see where we are. Let's see what we got. Let's see what we need to fix, because that Kentucky team is going to make a run to the Final Four. I'm just telling you, they were a Sweet 16 team a year ago. They may be more talented this year. So what a perfect opportunity for you. But what if you win that game? What if you go in there and upset Kentucky? You'll be the underdog. You will, and that's fine. We'll be not picked to win that game, and that's okay. But what if you win that? What if you beat Marquette? What if you just get one? That could be the difference from you being one of the first 4 out again this year, according to Joe Lunardi right now, and getting into the NCAA tournament. These games are important. And look, those teams are probably, at that point in the season, November 9th and December 13th, they're probably going to be better than you. But you can be talented enough to win those games. And you put that on top of what the Hoosiers are going to be doing this year with all of your Big Ten games, right? All of your games that you have with Purdue home and home. You've got big games against Nebraska and Washington that we talked about in terms of the NCAA tournament. You've got some tough road trips in there, like Illinois, who's expected to be really good. You have to win your games. They're so important. And it's such a stupid idea. Just win your games. But Indiana hasn't done that. And I'm highlighting those 2 non-conference games for a specific reason, because you didn't win them last year. You haven't won them and didn't win them with Mike Woodson as your head coach. Those are your times to do it. The other games are important, yes. Even your trip to Puerto Rico is important to play against the all-star team over there and things like that. Those are reps to get you ready. But I do hope, and this is a different side note here, I do hope that in some of those lower level non-conference games that Indiana doesn't mess around. Don't let these teams hang around and have a shot with 5 minutes to play inside of Assembly Hall. How many times did we sit there and do that with Mike Woodson as the head coach? Where, I mean, look at some of these games from a year ago. Who was it? There's a couple of them in here. UNC Greensboro, that was dicey. There's a couple of them in here. It was more, I think, 2 years ago that we had a lot of those. Just Chattanooga wasn't an easy game. No, that wasn't an easy game. That's where Malik Renew just went off because we didn't have anybody else. So just games like that, man. Don't let the Chattanoogas of the world come in here and compete with you. Win those games, dominate those games, and then have a chance to beat either Marquette or Kentucky, take care of business in the Big Ten, and you're a tournament team. That's all I'm saying. All right, final segment coming up here on Locked On Hoosiers. We're going to talk about this idea of college basketball versus the NBA. Why so many players are taking their name out of the draft and returning to college, and how it could benefit the Hoosiers moving forward. We'll have that for you in our final segment here on Locked On Hoosiers. All right, final segment on Locked On Hoosiers. Thank you so much again for being here. Shout out to all my everydayers as we are churning right along here through the end of May and into June. So thank you so much for that. And if you are listening on audio on any of your podcasting platforms, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, however you listen to us. Thank you so much for doing that and really, really appreciate it. Just make sure that you're following us and have those notifications turned on. So if we have bonus episodes or breaking news episodes, you never miss any of those. And then send it to somebody that's not already listening or somebody that you have not sent it to yet. Just copy the link and send it to them. We need them and want them listening to this show every single day. So thank you so much for doing that. And for those of you watching on YouTube on the video side of things, you know the drill, right? There's 3 steps. Hit the thumbs up. It likes the video, tells us you like what's going on over here. Drop your thoughts in the YouTube comments about any of the stuff we've talked about today. And then subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. All of those things help us grow. They help us get better. And so thank you so much for being a part of that. All right, so final segment here on today's show, and we're talking about this idea of college basketball versus the NBA. And this has been something that has evolutionized or has been, is that a word? Sure, we'll go with it. That is that has evolved over the last several years and really over the last several decades, right? Because you go back to the early 2000s. I'm talking early 2000s of in even late 90s of Kobe Bryant and LeBron James and those types of guys who were good enough in high school to go straight to the NBA. They said, nah, we're good. We don't need college. We're good enough to go pro. And they did. And there were very few guys that were able to do that successfully, but the ones that did were awesome. And Kobe and LeBron are 2 of the biggest examples. Then they decided, nah, we're not going to let that happen. You're going to have to go to college. So the rules and regulations were put in. Even if you're just a superstar in high school, you still got to go play some college basketball. All right, fine. Well, then guys like John Calipari and others said, hey, let's abuse the crap out of this system and let's just go complete one and done and just get the most talented kids. We'll play them for a year. We'll let them do whatever the heck they want, and then we'll put them in the NBA and we'll claim them. All right, cool. They did that forever. Well, now you got to play for several years and you got to have eligibility and you got to the system has just evolved from there, right? But now you stop in 2025 and you start to look, and this has been going on for a couple of years, but the NIL idea changed everything. College athletes being paid to play college basketball has changed the landscape completely. And what I mean by that is you are now seeing big name college basketball players who have the ability to declare, quote unquote, for the NBA draft, go and test the waters, play in the combine, and just see where they are, right? They get the feedback, they see where they are, they get an idea with all the mock drafts and things of where they are predicted to be drafted. Then they have the option to say, I'm going to stay in the draft, I'm going to go, see you later, or come back and play college basketball. And that's always been there, but it's more popular than it's ever been before because players are making money in college and good players are making good money in college. And I look at guys just across the board. I mean, look at a Braden Smith at Purdue or Otega Owe at Kentucky or all these types of players who have said, let me go to the NBA draft. Let me play in the combine, do all the workouts and things like that. And, oh, I'm not going to be a lottery pick? Late first round, early second round. I mean, yeah, it's okay. May have to play in some G League for a little bit. And it's not as much guaranteed money, and some of it's not guaranteed at all. But I do have this NIL money over here at Kentucky or at Indiana or at Michigan or Florida or wherever. They're going to pay me 1.2 to go play this year and compete for a national title and raise my draft stock and then be almost a lock to be a lottery pick in the next year's draft. I think I like that idea. I think I'm going to do that. And so many players have done that. I just saw this morning that LeBaron Philon last night at the deadline is returning to Alabama. Big name players are doing this all over the sport of college basketball. And why would you not? It makes sense. If your draft stock is not where you want it to be, you really want to be a lottery pick. First round is solid, but if you can be a lottery pick, that's where the money is. That's where the guaranteed money is. That's where a roster spot is. It just makes everything so much better for you. And so if you're not there or they're telling you, hey, you need to work on your defensive feet movement or whatever the case may be, right? You need to work on your shot blocking. You need to work on your attitude. You need to work on your mid-range shots. Whatever the case may be, you can take that, go back to school, make great money being a college athlete in this times that we're in, and get better. And on these teams that you're doing it on, you're going to compete for national championships, and then you get to go in the next year. There's no rush to get to the NBA anymore. And folks, this is a good thing. This is a good thing all around. This is great for college basketball. And for those of you who are NBA fans here, that's great for the league too, man. The association needs stuff like this because it got so bad during that one and done era because there were so many young players in the NBA who were just uber talented, just raw as could be, but they were raw. They were not good. They were not ready for the NBA. They were playing with grown men and they just weren't ready for the league. They got there eventually, but the NBA struggled because of it. And college basketball is going to benefit from this too, because some of the best players in the country are returning to the college game. And so Indiana in particular, we weren't in this situation because of everybody graduating or transferring or whatever. Mackenzie Mgbako was in that situation. If he were to have returned to Indiana and not have transferred to Texas A&M, he was a part of this conversation. And he did test the NBA draft waters and he decided to return to Texas A&M. So there's a correlation, an example for Indiana fans here. And I think this could benefit us moving forward. Will this always be the narrative in the case? I don't know. I think it depends on how much money college basketball players are going to be making in the future because of revenue sharing and things like that. But at least for right now, college basketball is going to be awesome because of the talent that's in there. And the Hoosiers could see themselves in this situation this time next year. The deadline was last night, so no more announcements, nothing like that. If you're in the draft, you're in the draft. And if you're going back to school, you're going back to school. But the Hoosiers have several guys that they could see in this situation next year and moving forward. And I love this idea. I think it's great for the kids. I think it's great for the NBA. And I think it's great for college basketball. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers. Thank you again so much for being here. For all my audio listeners, my YouTube watchers, and my everydayers, you all are, you're awesome. I really appreciate you supporting this show each and every day, okay? We are back tomorrow. Plus, hey, a Big Ten squad episode comes out this afternoon, so make sure you watch and listen to that. Lots of fun. We talk about the playoff. We talk about scheduling and USC's win total, okay? Mark was so happy to be there, and we all just gave him a big smile, okay? So be sure you check that out this afternoon, and then we are back tomorrow. All right, Hoosier fans. So until then, stay safe, and I'll talk to you later.